Metro on 1019 WDET FM. It's Wednesday. I'm Tia Graham. This week we're joined by Colin Jackson in the co-hosting chair. I almost said we're just joined by Colin Jackson, like you've been here.
Hey, I feel like I'm here.
Like you've just been here for a long time. That's how it feels like.
Hey, Detroit's a new home. DET's a new home.
Yeah.
Yeah, and today on the program, do you engage in textiles and fabrics? What led you to engage with it? Is it a tradition that you started or one that you're continuing from your family? Today on the Metro, we'll discuss the history of quilting and talk with you, the listener, about how you got involved in a variety of craft projects or didn't get involved. You know, you can call in at 313-577-1019 to let us know.
I can't wait for that conversation, and I also can't wait for what's happening right now. Mastodons roamed the earth somewhere between 23 million and 12,000 years ago. But while they existed before humans, mastodons they're on the come up again. Hundreds of their fossils have been found in Michigan alone, which helps explain why the animal became our state fossil in 2002. And recently, a bill that passed the Senate and is sponsored by Michigan Senator Gary Peters, it wants to make the mastodon America's first ever national fossil. One place where you can see our state fossil up close is at the University of Michigan Museum of Natural History in Ann Arbor. To talk with us about the history of mastodons, their importance, and why they're getting attention from people nationwide, we have Jake Downey here. Jake is a docent at the Museum of Natural History in Ann Arbor. Jake, welcome to the Metro. I'm super excited right now. That's why I'm flying, because I get to learn about fossils and mastodons. How are you?
Hi, it's great. I'm good. How are you? It's great to be on the show.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. So just jumping right into things, woolly mammoths, elephants, mastodons. What's the difference?
Sure thing. Yeah, it's a common question we get at the museum. So mammoths and mastodons look very, very similar. We get a lot of people who walk in, and just because they see a big fossilized looking elephant on display, we get a lot of comments that they look like mammoths. But the kind of interesting thing about them is that mammoths and mastodons are not super, super closely related. Mm-hmm. Mammoths are actually more closely related to the Asian elephant, which is a currently living species, than they are to the mastodon. And even the mammoth and the Asian elephant are more closely related than our two modern-day elephants are related to each other. And so the fur and the kind of adaptations that we see that allowed them to live in that colder weather, those were just things that developed kind of convergently between our mastodon and our mammoth. And so even though they look relatively similar, they do have a pretty distant history from each other and have quite a number of differences as well. We often look at their teeth as well to tell them apart, and mastodons tend to be a little bit shorter and stouter than our mammoths. But they were just both these elephant relatives that adapted to this kind of colder environment, and so we do see a lot of the similarities.
Yeah, and just really quickly, if you could answer, do you know what their last common ancestor was before they but split off from one another?
Sure. I'm not entirely sure what that ancestor was called or looked like, but it would have been around, I believe, 24 million years ago.
Wow.
So both mammoths and mastodons once roamed Michigan and the United States and the Americas as a whole, and so they would have been crossing paths with each other, but they did split off from each other a pretty long time ago.
Wow.
Even though they look quite similar, yeah.
Yeah. So where were mastodons in Michigan? What were some of the big places that you all found them all over, or are they found in one specific area? Like, where were they found, and what made Michigan such a good place for them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So mastodons, unlike the mammoth, were adapted to kind of more temperate environments. We think of mammoths as, crossing these big wintry tundras all the time. But mastodons would have been living in environments much like that we see today. They would have been living in more forested areas with a lot of pine trees and places that, would have summers and springs and a little bit more seasonality to them, some more temperate environments. And so Michigan was kind of a perfect place at that time because while, it would have been a little bit colder around the time that they lived, there was quite a bit of vegetation that they could be browsing on. And so we find a whole lot of them around here, particularly on farms where we get a lot of tillage and just people moving soil that allows them to kind of get dug up every once in a while, and so they can be found all over the state and even reached as far south as South America. So they were pretty common around the country, which is, I believe, why there's such a push to kind of recognize these really amazing creatures.
Jake, could you imagine just driving down, in the fall when we're going to look at the beautiful leaves in Michigan and just a mastodon just walks out of the forest? That would be absolutely insane to experience.
Oh, yeah.
It's amazing. So what made mastodons so special? Why do people care about them?
I think we care about them just because they are this kind of icon of the Ice Age. And I think especially to the Americas, the Ice Age is kind of this, it is kind of like this last big area where we have these massive creatures. You had mammoths and mastodons walking alongside, saber-toothed cats and giant ground sloths. And so it was this period of time where America, had these really, really massive creatures, which we just don't see anymore. And so I think there's been a lot of, study around that. We find a lot of fossils from that period, and mastodons are kind of this very common icon of that period of time when, we see this really unique ecosystem, and we really see kind of human involvement within that ecosystem begin to show up in the fossil record. And so I think the Ice Age and the animals in it are both this story of what life in this area used to look like, but also what human life used to look like. And I think there's something that really captivates people.
Yeah. If you're just tuning in, we're chatting with Jake Downey, a docent at the University of Michigan's Museum of Natural History. We're talking about mastodons, an animal that could be found thousands and maybe even millions of years ago in Michigan. And there's an attempt by Congress to now make the mastodon America's national fossil. So that means that we're finding mastodons everywhere, Jake, throughout the United States of America.
We do find a lot of them kind of in this area and in the Midwest. And so anywhere where you're going to get kind of fossils from the Ice Age, there's a decent chance that you might find something like a mastodon or a mammoth in there, depending on where you are. But those kind of massive creatures were common during that time. And so where they were, there's always a possibility that we can find them. But they're pretty common throughout the United States,
which is amazing to even think about. And as well, at the University of Michigan Museum of Natural History, you also have On the Trail of Mastodons exhibit that was there. It's an amazing trail that was found near Saline, Michigan, which, just thinking about different places and spaces where you're finding fossils, how are they often found?
Yeah, so as I kind of briefly said earlier, it's actually a lot of times found just by ordinary people, which is quite incredible, especially on farms. In order to find fossils, we need to get rock that has been exposed. And so, when you're living in a place in the Midwest that can sometimes have, a little bit of flat terrain, it can be difficult to find some of those rock outcroppings. But when farmers are constantly tilling their soil or they're digging to create wells, they'll occasionally stumble upon some incredible stuff. And so a lot of the mastodon fossils we find, and just a lot of the things we find from the Ice Age in general, come from everyday farmers who stumble upon something, get curious about it, and contact a researcher somewhere who also gets curious about it. And it turns into oftentimes at least years-long excavation for these incredible animals. And so it really is built on the backs of everyday people who find these things and just get curious about them. And so I think that's the really kind of fun thing about some of these mastodons is just the stories that often happen in our backyards with finding them.
I love that so much. And I'm curious, that kind of gets into what I was wondering about, which is what tips do you have for people that want to be kind of amateur archaeologists looking through their backyards or looking for fossils, or even like I was at the beach, and I found something that I thought might be some sort of like ancient lamprey. Kind of what tips do you have for the amateur people that may want to go out and look for mastodons themselves?
Yeah, so not every place is going to be equal for that. As I said, in order to find fossils, it involves a lot of digging through rocks and trying to find places where that rock is exposed. And so, unfortunately, unless you've got a big old mine dug down in your backyard, it might be difficult to find something there. But there are a lot of places kind of within the area where we can go to find fossils. Even, the famous Petoskey Stone in Petoskey, Michigan. Those are all these fossilized coral samples that just happen to wash up on Michigan beaches. And so, that's a very common location to find these really, really incredible fossils. But I think the best thing to do is, do some research and find locations where people can find fossils. Stay curious with it and kind of always take a peek at what's going on around you and investigate what you can try and find within some of the rocks that are near you. And also just be respectful of what you find. It's also very important to note that, there are only so many fossils that we can find. And so, it's always great to leave something for others, or to, even if you're especially curious about something, bring it to a researcher who can tell you more about it, because there's a decent chance that even they may become interested in that, and that becomes new data that we can learn from. And so, while having a private collection is nice, it's always great to kind of bring other people into it so that we can all kind of be curious towards these things. And so never be afraid to share what you find.
And before we let you go, would love to know the next steps to possibly making the mastodon America's fossil. What would be the next steps for that, and what would that look like for us?
Yeah, so I'm not sure of the exact legislation that they're going to put through, but I know that, with it becoming Michigan state fossil,
yes,
that was all built off of the work of a lot of schools and researchers who kind of individually, and especially with the schools, a lot of the students at those schools who really made this push for that to become a thing. And so
nice.
I think some of the big next steps with it is, I think getting more people kind of engaged in paleontology and interested in these animals. And if this does get pushed through, I think it brings more awareness to the importance of some of these animals and the idea of studying fossils and ancient ecosystems. And so I at least am very hopeful that with more support for this build that people recognize sort of the importance of paleontology outside of, things like Jurassic Park, where we think about, the idea of bringing back dinosaurs. But in reality, a lot of the work that we do is trying to understand things that happened right in our backyards thousands and even millions of years ago, and trying to use that to understand how that led to where we are today, and also what it could mean for our future. I mean, the Ice Age is this period of vast environmental change, and we're now, seeing things that are even on a greater scale than that. And so understanding how animals lived during then informs how we think of where we are now. And so I think that this kind of project and this bill that they're putting out, I think takes us big steps in sort of realize and helping people realize the importance of that. And so that's why I'm really happy with seeing this become a thing, and especially shouting out the mastodon, which is, such an iconic figure of the American Ice Age.
Jake, I love the way you ended that, talking a little bit about how it connects to our current history and where we could be going in the future with the things we're seeing with our climate, and it's changing, and looking backwards will help us go forward and how to better predict what to do as humans. So thank you so much, Jake, for joining the show. Jake Downey is a docent at the University of Michigan Museum of Natural History. We'll see you at the museum, Jake. The Metro on 101.9 WDET FM. I am Tia Graham.
I'm Colin Jackson, wondering what mastodon sounded like.
Oh, that's perfect, because I want to know too. Like Jurassic Park, they make up sounds, they shrink wrap the animals, but you can learn the truth about mastodons at the University of Michigan Museum of Natural History. So if you are interested, you want to learn more, you want to become a novice paleontologist, you can go on over to the University of Michigan's Museum of Natural History with Jake. It's amazing. Colin, what's coming up?
Coming up, we got a conversation I am so excited about. We're going to talk about knitting and quilting, their history, modern uses, and the way people are weaving the past and present together through physical art. Call in to 313-577-1019 and let us know how you got into fabrics, what inspired you to pick up a craft work, what does it bring out in you? We'll hear about the beauty of craft work and listen to your responses next on The Metro.
The Metro on 1019 WDET FM. I am Tia Graham.
And I'm Colin Jackson. Maybe it's because you grew up watching a parent or a grandparent do it. Maybe you had a friend that did it. Or maybe you just like the community around it. Or maybe, honestly, sometimes it's just something to do with your hands. There are countless reasons why someone may take up a needle-based craft like crocheting, knitting, or quilting. But these hobbies have rich histories behind them, whether it's origins in ancient Egypt or ties to African storytelling traditions. Still, we see representation in these spaces associated with them can sometimes be better.
And Colin, for me, it's fascinating to see it thrive in a world where handheld technology is king right now. And to see the love for needlework grow throughout the city of Detroit, Metro Detroit, and in this country has been really, really cool. I'm interested in the historical connection to needlework and quilting that we can learn from today. Joining us on the show now, we have two women in the world of needlework and textile. April Shipp is a fiber artist and sculptor. She lives in Detroit. And April, welcome to the Metro. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yay.
I'm super excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here. I've been following your work for a little while now, so it's just great to have you here in studio with us. And we're also joined on the phone by Sally Moore, the owner of Parker Avenue Knits in Detroit. Sally, thank you so much for joining us this morning on the Metro.
Thank you for having me. I am super excited for the opportunity.
No, this is about to be a lovely conversation. Sally, I'm curious, because you've been in business for around 2.5 years now, but you've been knitting for much longer than that. Can you talk to us about how you got started?
The good old-fashioned way my mother taught me. When I was a little girl, it remarkably did not take as a passion or a hobby, but stitching is like riding a bike. There's some muscle memory there, and you never forget. So I got started, and later in life went back to it, and the rest is now history in the making.
I love history in the making. Her story. April, you've been on display in museums. You've also just been traveling around with your work, working with other individuals within the community. What turned you into a textile crafter?
Believe it or not, public television. Yay!
Detroit PBS.
Yes, it was PBS, Channel 56, and Georgia Bonesteel back in the 80s. She had a show called Lap Quilting, and I was fascinated. Now, I had always made my own clothes up until that point, but when I saw this, I thought I could do that. And I was on board. I was hooked from that point forward. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, public access at its finest.
Yes.
I love that so much.
Love that so much. Yeah, April and Sally, I'm curious because, we talk so much about what different crafts mean to the people that do them and the artists that create these works, because that's what they are. They are works of art as well, in addition to kind of the utility of a scarf or a blanket or a quilt. So I'm curious, what does textile work for each of you? Let's start with you, Sally.
It's about sharing the love and sharing the joy. When you have that fiber and you're talking about, let's say, 1,000 yards of fiber, that's 1,000 yards that run across your hand. So I always believe that you really have to do it first of all, it takes a lot of time and effort. So if somebody makes you something, trust and believe that they love you. And it gives you that opportunity to give something that has come from you, that has gone through you, and will live on beyond you. And there's no other feeling like it.
April, the same question to you. What does it mean for you personally to work in fabrics?
Fabrics, oh my God, to feel them against my skin. First off, the first thing you're clothed in, the first thing you're swaddled in is cloth, right? And when you die, that's the last thing wrapped in is cloth as well. So cloth to me is just the feeling of it in my fingers is just amazing. I love textiles. And I think we weave so many stories of love in what we do. With my work, I tell stories. I tell narratives, funny and serious, sad and happy. It's all in the cloth.
And you have some samples here with
I
us
have
right
some
now as well in
samples.
studio. If you
do.
could describe just one or two pieces.
So, okay, this one I made as a challenge. It was a psychedelic mushroom challenge. And so it's called Puff Puff Pass. And so on this little small quilt, I have a frog and I have a fly. And they're both sitting on toadstools and they're smoking, right? And you wonder, why did the frog eat the fly? Because he wouldn't pass. So I call this one Puff Puff Pass. So you can tell so many stories with your fabric. And this is just all fabric. There's no paint on here at all. It's just all fabric.
Wow.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Absolutely
And then I have
incredible.
this one real quick. This one's called Flourish to Nourish. And I'm doing a series of quotes about women and nursing. Can you see that? It's a mother nursing her baby.
I love the care. You see a hand gently holding the baby's
Yeah.
head and back at the same time, the little bow in her hair,
Absolutely.
everything.
So with my work, I tell stories. I share the love of what we do. I teach. And this is my daughter. The beautiful Pasha. And this is called Indigo. And now she is purple, but I chose to make her purple because it's my world and I can do what I want, right? I can create whatever I want with cloth. You're limited only by your imagination.
Oh,
That's
and
it.
I want to bring Sally into this conversation as well, because one thing that April just said that stood out was the storytelling of fabric work, the storytelling of it. So in your words, Sally, how does needlework, fabric work tell stories?
Well, what's interesting is that we do pieces that represent times and spaces and things, but there's something we rarely stitch alone. So what we do is tell stories to each other that might have nothing to do with stitching, but it is such a strong way, particularly between generations. Mm-hmm. How often will you sit with your grandmother? How often are you going to sit with your mother when you're 8, 9 years old and listen to those tales that may not make sense then, but are going to stay with you and strengthen you and give you history and all sorts of good benefits through your life? It's a communal sport. And yes, I do call it a sport. But it creates community, whether it's one-to-one or many, in our case at the shop, many-to-one. It creates a vehicle by which we can share what we're thinking, what we're feeling, have our needs met to interact with each other. And so there are stories we will tell. I always say, be careful who you teach to knit or crochet, because you will be a part of their story for the rest of their life. I've never met anyone who stitches that doesn't remember who taught them.
No, that is absolutely beautiful. If you're just tuning in, we're chatting with April Shipp, a fiber artist and sculptor, and Sally Moore, the owner of Parker Avenue Knits in Detroit. We're discussing the importance of knitting and quilting and making physical art that helps connect our past to our present. And you can give us a call at 313-577-1019 to join the conversation. Sally, you had mentioned something just there, that this is a sport, and you may have these conversations. And when I think of sports, I think of teams, the people you knit around, that can become your team. I personally am part of a knitting group that my friend brought me into, and I know the ladies I knit with, they just talk about anything going on in their lives, whether it's their kids or their neighbors or work or anything else. Can you talk a little bit about kind of that community and that sport aspect of it all, and how important kind of spaces like yours in your yarn shop are for community building?
Absolutely. I did not set out to become the third space as it is, but that is truly what we've become. Because where do you go? How do you meet people? How do you make friends over 50 outside of work? You're empty nesting. things are happening in your life. Where do you go and how do you do that? And we have quietly become that third space, not to mention the color and the positive therapy that delivers to people just walking in. Our tagline is "It's a vibe," and it really, really is. Early in the journey of building the shop and that community, I kept crisscrossing with women who had thrivers and survivors and patients of breast cancer. And you began to find out that, wow, so many people have this going on in their lives. There's so many things that we have in common. And my philosophy in building the shop was, if we can sit across from each other doing this craft that we all love, we can begin to see each other just as individuals. And from there, we can have all sorts of conversations. And in my shop, we do. We don't shy away from anything, race, politics, life, and all of its events, good and bad, happy and sad. We truly have built community for each other, many of us strangers before we walked in, but the fiber just levels the playing field and reminds you that we are all part of one big community.
I love that. So just before we go to our next break, some people may think needlework is for older individuals. However, can we go into how it's not true at all, that it's just for older individuals, that it's just for someone who's at a certain age or maybe retired now? Colin is a perfect example. He is in needlework and he is a 30-year-old man. So it's for everyone. Can we go into that just a little bit, about 30 seconds before we go to our break? We'll start with you, April.
Absolutely. I love seeing young people pick up this mantle. It's difficult because they think it's boring, right? But once you get into it, like Colin, you find out you really love it. Leave that in the cloth. I can teach kids how to do drawings and whatever they want, whatever it is you want to create, we can create in the cloth, whatever it is. And so it's not just for young people. For older people. It's for anybody who wants to try. It really is.
Creativity is ageless. It's ageless. Young people do amazing, amazing things, and we're seeing it in fashion and all the ways, particularly in the crochet space. It's just undeniable right now. It's one of the hottest things in fashion. Taylor Swift was just rocking a dress that everybody's working to make now. So trust and believe. It is definitely timeless, and the young people know it.
We're going to go to a break really quickly. I just want to throw in, I have multiple crochet and knit dresses right now. But coming up, we'll continue this conversation about knitting and quilting. Call in and let us know, what do you knit? Or what do you make with your hands in your free time? The number on the line is 313-577-1019. We'll return to the Metro next. Welcome back to the Metro here on 101.9 WDET FM. I'm Tia Graham, and I'm here with Colin Jackson, reporter with the Michigan Public Radio Network. And we're asking the question, how did you get into knitting? What made you start knitting or quilting? Does it connect to a family tradition, or is it a way for you to bond with others? Give us a call, 313-577-1019. We are chatting with April Shipp, a fiber artist and sculptor, and Sally Moore, the owner of Parker Avenue Knits in Detroit. Thank you both so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me again. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Of course. And we're going to bring in another fiber artist, local fiber artist here, Fatima Hawk. Fatima, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro this last minute, but I thought of you especially as well with the other beautiful women we have on the show to talk about fiber work and fiber and what it means to the culture. So Fatima, welcome to the Metro.
Thank you so much for having me, Tia.
Yeah, so just throwing you in there as well, go into a little bit of what fiber work means to you. We've talked in the past about the cultural significance for you as well, being a Bangladeshi American woman, but just talk about that a little bit.
Yes, so I actually come from a long tradition of fiber arts, particularly Naqshi Kata, which is the traditional quilting of Bangladesh and West Bengal. Generations of women have used fiber, made these quilts out of old saris, and they have made beautiful designs using a simple running stitch and archived a lot of the political as well as familial history within these quilts in Bangladesh. And so I come from that long tradition of it.
Fatima, I've seen some of your work before firsthand. It's absolutely gorgeous and amazing work. And just like April talked about a little bit earlier, as well as Sally, storytelling. So how do you use fiber work as a fiber artist to tell the stories of your people, of your culture?
So I loved what the others had to say about storytelling, and I completely agree. Fiber art is a medium in which you can tell very rich stories. My pieces are typically portraits of people, and so I've used them to document the history of Bangladeshis in Michigan. And I've collected oral histories and created these portraits of people in various time period. So I have this one piece called Thriving at Work, and it's where a Bangladeshi man is in his work uniform at work, and he's got the hat on that has the work logo on it. And it really represents how Bangladeshis in Michigan have been part of the various factories we've had and part of that workforce. And so in a lot of ways, it's telling those types of histories.
And before I let you go, before we get to our next callers down the list, I want to say thank you again, Fatima Haq, who is a fiber artist, Bangladeshi American, who is telling that story of Bangladeshi Americans here in Michigan through fiber work, which is amazing. I just want you to talk about the connection there as we talk about the past and the future and how it brings us together, and some of the things that you've been able to learn and the stories you've been able to tell to people who are outside of the Bangladeshi culture.
Yeah, so just being able to document some of the oral histories and then share it with the general public. I think that a lot of people didn't know that they had so many Bangladeshi neighbors, and they were able to say, oh, this is part of my community, and I'm getting to know that Bangladeshis have been in the state of Michigan since the 1970s, and even before that, I think before Bangladesh was even a country, actually. And so it's incredible to be able to see that there is a long-standing 50, 60 years of history just in the state of Michigan, and how we have always been here and have been a fabric of, of this community.
Fatima Haq is a fiber artist and Bangladeshi American who has been covering and documenting Bangladeshis in Michigan for the past 30 years or so. So thank you so much for joining the show short notice to contribute to the conversation about needlework.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Of course.
Yeah, what a lovely call right there. Continuing with the phones, we have Lorna in Detroit. Lorna, how are you doing today?
I'm fine, thank you. And you?
I'm doing just fine. Thanks for calling to the Metro. What brought you into craft work?
Well, I always was interested in it. Growing up, I would see different people sewing, but I never was formally taught. But after I retired, I got into a quilting group, Great Lakes African American Quilting Network, of which April is a member. And those ladies excited my love for needlework. So ever since then, I've been trying to learn more and be more immersed in that culture.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, and Lorna, just having you here, you also wrote in there that you have a fantastic teacher who is in attendance with us today.
Yes, April Shipp.
I love you, Lorna. You're so special.
Love you too.
Lorna is a phenomenal needle worker. She can take a jacket apart and reassemble it. She's phenomenal.
I love that so
She's
much.
so good. So talented.
And we talked about the community there, and I believe it was Sally who talked about you'll never forget who taught you how to do needlework, or whatever it may be, quilting or text, whatever it may have been. So, Lorna, can you just talk about the relationship that you've been able to build with April due to needlework?
Well, she She does so many things, some I never would attempt. But her quilting is just phenomenal. And she inspires me to get better at the craft. So that's what I'm working on now. That's my journey for the rest of my existence, is to get better and to create and have people enjoy whatever it is I've created.
Yeah, thank you so much for that call, Lorna. And and Lorna mentioned there's something that I thought was interesting, which is she stuck with it. She got into it. She found her community. She kept with it. Last night I was trying to teach people to knit. I know I was trying to build my own.
You were a teacher last night?
I really was. I was trying to do this all together, in a group setting. I decided, okay, maybe some one-on-one work might be better. Some people got frustrated with it. Some people, I really hope, continue to be lifelong knitters.
Yeah.
I'm curious for both of you. Sally, what are some barriers that keep people from really getting more into knitting? And how do you make sure that people stay with this beautiful craft? You had mentioned it didn't stick at first with you.
Exactly. The frustration level can sometimes be pretty daunting. There are parts of it that just don't feel normal. The beauty is we have the knitting and the crochet. We teach both in our shop, and we have people that are bistitchual, as I refer to them.
I love that.
And the beef.
Hey. So we encourage. And I think that's what Lorna was saying. It is the encouragement. It is the community. When you're doing it by yourself, that's what happened to me when I was young, 9, 10 years old. I do a few stitches. My mother wasn't sitting right there. I mess up. I don't know how to get through it. And so I get frustrated and put it down. So having community, being able, trust me, we have people who come in the door and they throw their project on the table, and they just look at these total strangers and go, help. And guess what? We get them on track. We figure it out. We commiserate. We rip it out. We do whatever has to be done. But, April made the statement, the only limit is your imagination.
Absolutely.
So don't let perfect be the enemy of progress.
And
Just keep going. Just keep going. You will see the difference in the beginning of your project, and then towards the end when you really got the hang of it. So it's about being there for each other, and that is why the demographic of the shop can make a difference. You want to know that you're with folks who kind of understand without being told. They understand what you're going through. They understand your challenges and your barriers. And that was always the premise behind Parker Avenue Knits. And we did it, I did it, to break down barriers, create community in Detroit, in an urban setting with more Black and brown faces. And we have truly done it, but we are not all women. We are not all Black. We are not all old. We are not all young. We are absolutely a diverse community. And whatever your issue is, bring it. We know somebody. If we can't fix it, we'll get you to somebody who can.
Yes, preach. And I know that feeling personally, having to rip out all your knitting. You go 5 rows in, you spend an hour on it, and now you're just staring at a long line of yarn. April, I'm curious because you have brought some incredibly lovely quilts with us today and examples to share, and you've gone through some of them. I'm staring at one right now that is so ornate and so beautiful. And I know you didn't just wake up doing that immediately.
What you mean? She woke up like this.
I woke up just like this.
Exactly. So I'm curious for you in quilting, kind of what are some barriers that keep people from sticking with this craft when they're just not getting into it? And how do you encourage people?
So I had, as a child, imaginary friends, right? So I have an overactive imagination anyway. I see color everywhere. I'm sorry, what was your question? I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I need to hear about this,
Well, this piece was a piece that I made about Gilda Snowden. She was a Detroit artist. Yeah. And this piece was actually at the Scarab Club. I'd never got a chance to meet her, but I wanted to make a piece dedicated to her. So in making this piece, my sewing room is a complete wreck with stuff all over the floor. This is how I operate. And I was working on this piece. I would find a piece literally on the floor, pick it up, stick it on there, sew it on there, and that's how I create the piece. just free, just feeling free. I love being able to just wake up in the morning, go into the room, and then just creating, just making whatever comes to mind. But I started off making bed quilts many, many years ago with Georgia Bone Steel. I was making those bed quilts. This is the evolution of 40 years.
Yes. Right now, we are chatting with April Shipp, a fiber artist and sculptor, and Sally Moore, the owner of Parker Avenue Knits in Detroit. We will be right back with more callers and more about needlework, fiber work, right here on the Metro. You all stay right there. It's the Metro on 101.9 WDET FM. I am Tia Graham here with Colin Jackson, our residential newcomer to needlework. I guess you wouldn't say newcomer because you're a teacher now.
Yeah, I'm a teacher now. I've been doing this since the 5th grade now.
Oh,
Tia.
you're about this life.
I'm about this life. I also took a break and came back to it.
Okay, so I'm the newbie here.
You might be the newbie.
It's okay. I'm okay. I'm surrounded by
Sounding
great
like
people.
a vet.
Yeah, I'm surrounded by amazing people. Thank you. I'm surrounded by amazing people who I can learn from today. And we do have callers still on the line. But before we get back to the callers, I just want to talk about the generational importance of crafting, of needlework, of using your hands, especially just as we think about African Americans, we think about the Great Migration, but we also think about the slave trade, and we think about enslaved Africans coming over with this knowledge they already have built in, and how they took that knowledge and now it's here in the hands with us today as we sit here and have the conversation. So we're going to start here with you, April, in studio, talking about the importance of that message that was passed down, that craft that was passed down from enslaved Africans down to where we are today. You did have a piece with you here as well, Strange Fruit, which has been on display at the Car Center multiple times. So if we can just get into the importance there of that generational learning.
Absolutely. So when I think about our enslaved ancestors having to work from Caint to Caint, from Caintsy to Caintsy, then going in and sewing by hand, by candlelight, to keep their families warm. And what they used was old clothing, because fabric holds memory, right? So if you have your grandfather's shirt or your mother's dress, a small portion of that to weave into your quilt, you would always have that as a memento of that person. And so they did a lot of those things by hand, out of necessity.
Yeah. Sally, same thing, because I'm so sorry, Sally, because April, you still wanted to get in. I wanted to get into the Strange Fruit quilt that you have right now.
So this is a small sample of Strange Fruit, and Strange Fruit is the title actually is Strange Fruit, A Century of Lynching and Murder, 1865 to 1965. And it is a quilt with the names of the African American men, women, and children who were murdered in this country in a 100-year period at the hands of other Americans. So this is a quilt based on American history, not African history, but American history. And so again, it has the names of over 5,000 men and women and children who were murdered in this country in a 100-year period.
Sally, I know same question bringing you in, just talking about that importance of that generational knowledge being passed down.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I don't see as much being done in terms of weaving true story into the pieces, though some people choose to express themselves in that way. Some people one of the reasons we use good fiber, and no shade to my big box stores, but the reason we really encourage people to invest in fine wools and fine silk, in fine fiber for their needlework, is because you want it to last. You want this baby and the next generation and the next generation to be wrapped in that blanket and continue to feel that love. So that's one way in which we pass it on and we continue the tradition. But there's also the fact that we sit in community, and that's where the conversations have, and that is very traditional in the African American community, in the African community. It is the storytelling. It is the verbal history, because we weren't allowed to keep our history. We weren't allowed to write it down, or we were illiterate and didn't know how to write it down, but it didn't mean that it had to die. And in this day and age, with all the noise around us and the short attention spans, having this tool to bring people still and in each other's presence. I have some amazing friends and customers who can watch movies and watch TV and even read books while they stitch. That is not me. I have to focus. But usually nobody wants to do that when they're stitching in community. They want to talk. They want to share. They want to give the lesson. And the fact that the young tend to learn this from the old provides the perfect playground for that history that no one can take away from you, whether they take it out of your books or not.
There's a few themes we've heard today that I think have just been so lovely. The idea that from the very moment you're born, the first thing you have is some sort of created piece of fabric, cloth or knitted or however. And then you have these heirlooms that you either pass down throughout generations, or these traditions that you take the old to new that keep surviving the same way the stories have survived through quilts and everything. And it is so beautiful how it all fits together. I want to go back to the phones real quick, where we have Janet in Dearborn. And Janet, I understand that you yourself have a couple quilting heirloom traditions and a lot of hours of crafting under your own belt. How are you doing, Janet?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on. But yes, I am an amateur quilter, but the first thing I did make that my mom and my aunt helped me with was a tree skirt for Christmas. Mm-hmm. And the pattern I had was about 50 years old. My dog then ate it, and I cried for about 4 hours, and I taped it back up, but it was okay after that.
No. Oh, no. But so just thinking about your connection, Janet, with your mom and teaching you, what did that feel like, having that space there with your mom?
Oh, it was wonderful. And also just to have quiet time to talk and listen and learn was just really great bonding with her, especially I just wanted to make a tree skirt because I had moved into my first home with my husband, and I wanted to make something special. I just feel like homemade things make a home. So that's what I wanted to do. And other things that my family and I have kind of made together is whenever we have a new baby in the family, all of the women embroider a square, and then we put all the squares together and quilt that into a quilt. So the baby has a piece of all the women in our family too. So I thought that was really nice as well.
Janet, thank you so much for calling in this morning, actually. And unfortunately, we are at the end of our program. So we are ending things off. We were talking about quilting and needlework and fabric work. And we definitely want to extend this conversation out and bring Colin back, bring everyone back, so we can all have this communal discussion once again. And hopefully when we do come back, I will be all in knitting, needlework, doing the whole thing, knitting, quilting, whatever you want to call it, I will be doing that. So I want to thank April Shipp for being here so much. April, you are a fiber artist, a sculptor based in the city of Detroit. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And we had Sally Moore, the owner of Parker Avenue Knits in Detroit. Thank you so much, Sally, for joining us as well.
Thank you. See you guys when we're stitching.
Yes.
Absolutely. That's the Metro for Wednesday, August 13th. You can listen to recent episodes online at WDET.org. I know I'll be revisiting this one. This felt spiritual. And make sure to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform. The show is also on YouTube if you like listening that way.
And Colin, if you don't make me something, I'm going to be like, what's up, man? I need a hat. A
Wait
big one. My
time.
head is big. This is WDET-FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation. Thanks for listening. We'll be back tomorrow.